Tuesday, July 26th. We've got a quorum present, Ben is online, and you have anybody else on there? Nope. Okay. And communications up next. Anybody have anything they wish to share with the committee?
Just that I put a communications in there explaining things for tonight and subsequent. So
Yep.
You've got a draft resolution that if the council wants to put a contingency fund back in, they can. In regards to the Sustainability Committee, I gave 3 possible ideas for consideration. You can pick and choose what you want. And then all the budget amendment ones, if we don't get to them tonight, we'll just add them to the next agenda. So they're not real time sensitive, sooner is better, but don't think that we have to rush through everything to get it through.
Those are just housekeeping things, right? That as you're...
Well, some of them are housekeeping, and some of them the council is going to have to be aware of because it's the biggest one is the revolving loan fund program.
Yep.
For the fund balance, but
Yep.
in generalities, everything else is housekeeping, correcting the accounting or merging funds together.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have anything else they would want to communicate?
No, but thank you for that memo, because I would have spent a lot more time trying to figure out what was going on, so thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Memo.
All right. No other communications. Then into the reports for June.
The kind of standard reports, when I skimmed through them, I didn't see anything, that I wanted to bring to anybody's attention. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I did add the one for the budget amendments. I'm not real fond of how the report comes out because it kind of combines everything together. So I'm going to see if I can find another one for next month. One thing new I've added, I put in the revenue expenditure report for the finance department and taxi and shared service. I'll start putting that in the monthly packet too, just so that you're aware of where this department goes.
Okay. Did anybody have any questions or comments on any of the reports in there? Yeah, I didn't see anything that like really stuck out. All right. Then a ARPA recap, please.
Well, the fiscal recap's the same. Council hasn't done anything since the Innovation Center. The presentation calendar that it was sent out with finance on Wednesday was already out of date when we sent out the city council Friday morning, and that was already out of date because I got more requests on Friday afternoon. So at this point, it looks like we are going to be finishing up on August 23rd. So at that point, council can give direction or start making decisions or whatever they want to do.
Okay. I mean, do you see, is that like a hard cutoff date or?
Well, I don't. Sooner or later, you're going to have a cutoff, and we really need to get the ARPA kind of settled so that we can go into the CIP process. So one of the questions that I'll have for the board on the 23rd is, okay, do you want to start voting now? Do you want a hard cutoff, that sort of thing? Do you want to distribute the first tranche now and do the next year? What do they want to do?
Okay.
Because we have until the end of 24 to do it, right?
24 to appropriate it, end of 26 to actually disperse it.
Okay.
One of the things we're kind of, Dave and I have been discussing is in what form would the finance or the council want it? So for example, we could take all the requests and put them in a resolution form, and the council could just go and say yay or nay, fill in the blanks as they wish with the amounts. Or we could do whatever other process, but right now, this is kind of new territory for us.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of one of the things we're looking at to try to simplify it. And then we may have one in there, you know, basically yay or nay about using the community foundation. And then if we do, then the council would have to put in the number at the end. Most of the whereases will be pretty consistent down the line. And then the therefores would actually be the request. And if you guys thought that was the way you wanted to do it, what I would do is I would direct the department heads that had requests in their department to draft their resolutions. Dave would probably do the template, and then each department could fill in the blanks for their individual requests.
Okay.
That's one way of doing it. If you have other ideas, we're certainly open to them.
Yeah, I do know, and this may not be the forum, but I do know that, you know, I sense that, and some people have already done, you know, their presentations, although I think most so far have been staff.
Yeah.
So we've got pretty good numbers, but I do know there's some who would still like to say there needs to be, whether you call it an application or something else, some specifics, so we learn more about, you know, so everybody answers the same question and whether or not they can do that along with, you know, so I think that's something that we probably still need to explore, because I feel like it would be helpful to have some direction and consistency as far as, you know, who's your group and, you know, that sort of thing, so.
Sure, and the other thing I could share with you is, before I came back here, I was reading the online version of the Hub, and the Community Foundation did release some awards that they gave out in May. It's in the Hub, and some of the same nonprofits that have either been here or we anticipate coming here were on that list. So you will know that if we were to direct it to them, they're already familiar with the organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And as you see the Hub and the list, you'll know who they are.
Yeah, so that's probably one of the first questions, is are we gonna try to distribute to anyone outside of the, any not-for-profits outside of city? Or
Yeah.
are we gonna give a lump sum to the community foundation and then make our internal decisions about the city? And I think that's where there's probably some
And that's up
discussion
to
or
the council.
confusion.
My preference would be is to let the Community Foundation do it. It really, they have a process and a system and more familiarity with the individual organizations than we do. And I think that for us, it'll be difficult to weigh one over another. And if one receives it and another one doesn't, I think it really puts a lot of pressure on the council. You know, as far as, well, why did you select this and not the other one? If we don't have established criteria, it's
Right.
gonna be hard to justify it. With them, they already have that.
Exactly.
So my personal preference all along is to let them do it. Plus, we have to account for all the individual disbursements. We could have them, as part of their service, do that for the finance department, which would save Dave's office,
Right.
you know, some time and effort, you know, to track all them. So I think there's definitely some benefits of doing that.
Yeah, it seems like a logical process to get through that. Then that also pulls away, like, you know, oh, those are your favorite, or, you know, that's your friends, brothers, cousins,
Right.
person.
In a small town, that can happen, right?
Yeah, it can, right,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
it would eliminate that portion of it.
Yeah, I think it would come across as being more transparent and objective, which I know is
Sure.
important to the council.
Okay, well, we'll see what council feels on that. When we do go through like our screening and ranking and scoring and all that sort of thing, will that be done as a council action or a committee of the whole action?
That's up to you. You know, I think that's probably a council discussion as
Okay.
we're working through these.
Yeah, yeah,
And we can maybe put that on as an additional agenda item at one of the next couple of meetings before
Sure.
we wrap them up, if that's what you guys suggest.
yeah, I mean, I think that would be, we should get that hammered out, because that should be an easier decision than making a decision about where the money goes.
Right, and then the other thing is, you know, do you want to try to allocate it all now, or do you want to hold a certain amount back? And if you did, what is that appropriate amount? And I think Dave can help you. He has
Right.
some ideas about that as we get deeper into discussion, because
Mhm.
if you allocate it all now, something might come up.
Yeah,
It'd be kind of nice to have something in your back pocket.
right, I like that, you know, go with the first tranche first and then go with the second one, but again, we'll see what council feels about that. All right, thanks, Dave, for the update on that.
You're welcome.
Anything else on ARPA? All right, so then I would approve a motion or I will entertain a motion for the approval of the finance minutes from July 12th.
Move to approve?
All right? Is that Ozzy or Greg?
Take your
I
pick.
got Ozzy as a second.
Okay, all right. Motion and second. Any other questions, edits, anything on the minutes? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And are any opposed? All right, then first item up we've got is, resolution to amend the 2022 budget to establish a contingency fund balance. And we'll open that for all the discussions.
Yep, as I said, based upon what happened at last council meeting, I drafted this, giving the council the ability to add a contingency fund again if they want to. I chose 80,000 because that was what we had historically done up through 19, and then it started changing.
Yep.
So I guess I'm going to leave it up to you folks. How do you want to continue?
Like I say, I mean, I recall having the discussions when Jamin presented us with that, and I know that we're all a little bit leery about how, because it was different. So, he had to sell us on that, and I guess we forgot the detail of, yeah, we can just go back and appropriate the budget movement by council vote.
Right, and because the council has not delegated to the finance committee or anybody else, the council's going to vote on it, whether it's contingency fund or not. A budget amendment requires 2/3 members elected, 8
Yeah.
people, whereas if there is a contingency fund, then it's simple majority in attendance. So if you got a council of 12, you could have 7 people show up, which means that 4 could approve it in that case. That's really the only difference between the two.
Right?
Did I see that the general fund balance has about 4.9 million, or did I misunderstand that?
That sounds about right.
I thought that's what I saw in one of the reports.
I think I had something in there. Yeah, the unassigned general fund as of the draft financials, and I think they're pretty close to about 4.9 million. Eventually, I want to have a conversation with the finance committee. I think we're putting money aside for the debt service fund that we really don't need to per se, because one of the reasons for contingency is cash flow, and if things go over or not. Well, the debt service fund is pretty much a given. We've already levied for it. By August 15th, we're going to have the cash, and unless we made an error in the budget, there shouldn't be any shortages or overages, so I don't think we need to have that there. But with that said, as it's currently written up, we are 1.2 million dollars over, so there's plenty of room there. You know, I'm not concerned about it. Obviously, Moody's would like to see us retain that balance where it is, but for $80,000, I'm not too concerned about it right now.
So if we were to, I guess my thought is if we were to take money out of the fund balance, when we had the contingency report, we tracked that pretty closely, and it's a lot easier to keep track of. It's sort of like having this is what we have, this little savings account, as opposed to, and I know, I'd like to think we're responsible, but I feel like when there's 4.9 million, it'd be easy to nickel and dime ourselves, whereas we've got the contingency. I know we always looked at that.
Right.
And it's like, gosh, we've already spent $60,000. To me, as I'm looking back on it, and I don't know if y'all feel differently, but I kind of like having that little pocket, because I know it's something we always look at as a little pocket, as opposed to just pulling money out of the I would lose track of it, and I don't think we would do that a lot, but I don't know, that's kind of my thought. But is there disadvantages, that you're thinking?
There's no disadvantage to it, if you want to set it up, you're right, you've got basically a smaller checkbook that you look at it and can be little bit more frugal if you want to. One of the things I want to point out that I've discovered that we were not following the statutes where we published it, so I'll make sure that we were starting that in the future.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us when we did the budget was if we actually budgeted the 80,000, that was really 80,000 less than we could spend on staffing or any other issues. If we're pulling it out of the fund balance, we don't have that issue, or the reserve fund, or whatever we're gonna call it.
Right.
We called it a lot of things. So that's where the decision was made last year, because what we were trying to do basically was, we ended up hiring, another IT person, and then we added hours at the fire station, and then we added a part-time in HR, and then everybody, got their 3.1% raise. If we were to budget it out of that 80,000 last year, we would have never been able to do all that. Mm-hmm. So I think that, my perspective is if we can just pull it out at a point where we need it, or maybe we only pull out, 20,000 here or 30,000 there instead of budgeting for it, I would feel better about that going into the next budget cycle, because the way I look at it, we'd be 80,000 in the hole if we budgeted that whole amount. Maybe you'd want to just budget part of that. That might be another way of doing it, is a combination of it. But the good news is if we need it, it's there. Plus, we still have ARPA money there as well if we really got into a pinch. So I think from a cash flow point of view, we're in pretty good shape, all things considered.
Dave, does that put us in any accounting danger as far as, like, if we do what Mayor's saying, and rather than putting it in as a line item in the budget to vote on, that you can just have the council vote and pull little bits from fund balance at a time for this contingency?
There's no accounting issue there. Depending upon how the budget is set up, I do the categories of fund balance, whether it's assigned, committed, and so forth. But yeah, there's no issues. If you wanted to go to fund balance 27 times during the year, you could. It's just up to my office to make sure that you're adhering to the fund balance policy and everything else. And as I stated, Moody's looks at our fund balance, wants us to have a healthy balance. But if you're taking $17,000 out and then 10,000, okay, but if you're taking 1.8 million, okay, that's going to draw somebody's attention.
For sure. Okay.
So at what point do you have to notice it?
It has to be noticed anytime, according to 6590, anytime you increase expenditures, you need to notice it. Now, I need to talk to John, because the statutes do allow you to put it on the website. I'm not sure if I want to go that route, because how many people look at the website for budget amendments? At least in the local paper, they're used to having legal notices.
Okay.
Is that a class 1 or class 2?
Class 1.
Class 1. Okay, that's fairly doable. If it was like a class 4 or something, that could be problematic.
Right.
But we don't want you to have to do that 27 times either,
Yeah, right, yeah.
Sure.
because there is a cost and just the hassle of doing it.
Right, yeah, without looking, I would estimate we're probably gonna pay $25 for each publication.
Okay, all right, that's not terrible.
So how cumbersome would it be if we opted to use fund balance, but then got, got reports back on, essentially unplanned use of fund balance? But there's a lot of other things that probably come out of that, right, or not so much? When the council directs,
Well, every time council directs using fund balance, that, the budget's amended, and we have to put it in BSNA. But to be honest, whether I'm tracking it as a use of fund balance or use of contingency fund, the concept's still the same.
if we wanted to see money we've taken out, it'd be more challenging probably to find it in the fund balance as opposed to the contingency.
Not if you track it in BSNA correctly. I know how to do that, so.
Be as in council though, like.
Right, but I'd still give you the reports out of it, and it'll show, I'm basically setting up what's called a general revenues department, which would include the contingency and the revenues that don't apply to any one department. And so that'll be in a report, and it'll show $102,000 approved year to date, and then it's like, okay, that's made up of these 4 resolutions totaling up to 102, so it's not hard to track.
All right, I mean, I guess I'm comfortable with having it. Greg, do you want to add something?
I was just going to say, I agree with Tim. Because of the personnel issues that we are obviously going to have, and
Yeah.
when it comes to budgeting, and I don't want to set up that contingency fund. I just as soon stay the way we are. I also like the 2/3 vote. I think it shows more responsibility.
Okay, yeah, I'll agree with that. I mean,
As long as we know that we can take a look back and see where we've kind of gone,
Yeah.
had to tap into that without too much challenge, then that seems to make sense to me too.
yeah. well,
Yeah, and I don't object either to how we have it set up now. I think it's just the growing pains of learning how we're actually using this, being able to use this as a tool.
Yeah, and I think that's what we got tripped up on in our discussion in the last council meeting is we were forgetting about the extra step in there that we just needed to, and then trying to work on all of our fading memories and that.
In a way, I think it was brought forward wrong, because the contingency was put in there, or the word contingency was used. If we would have just said, take it from the general fund.
Right, then it would have been, the
then it
wording
would
would
have
have been all
prevented
right.
that confusion.
Right.
Yeah, because we could have voted directly on it anyway. Okay. So I think as long as we're covered, or, there's no accounting irregularity or anything with that.
Nope,
and
no
we
problem
can generate
whatsoever.
an additional report on it so that we can make sure to track it
Yep.
like we would with the once a month reports or something like that, then, I mean, I think that's reasonable.
So we'd be making a recommendation to council for option A, which is to use the fund balance? Or do we even need to do that?
Well,
Do we want to make a motion to recommend to council?
You're
using
thinking
fund
about a
balance?
subsequent resolution
Right.
for funding sustainability.
Yeah, I'm jumping
I
ahead.
guess I would ask, do you want as the committee, in regards to reestablishing the committee fund, to have a vote saying we don't recommend it?
I think that would probably be better, that we're just gonna stick with the rules that we had put in place with this budget year, and that we're just gonna explain a little more thoroughly about what the process is that we would
Okay.
go about it, like,
That way you're on record if you have
Right.
that.
that resolutions then have to be presented as transfer from a fund balance requiring 2/3 vote. And then we can do that literally at any time.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I would entertain a motion to recommend to council that we stick with our current rules established in this year's budget.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
okay. Does anybody have any other questions on that? Are you clear on what we're doing with this?
Yep.
Okay. All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend status quo then for this one. All right, next one up is the R137 from the last, regarding the Sustainability Committee's funding.
So as I said, I gave you three possibilities out there. Option A is to use fund balance. Option B is to use ARPA funds. And option C is using contingency fund, but that's kind of a moot point unless council doesn't go with your recommendation. As I said, I just drafted these up for conversation. I guess I'd recommend that the Finance Committee at least say which option they would recommend.
All right, in that one, I would say I would like it to be a transfer direct from fund balance, I think,
Balance,
with the
absolutely.
2/3 vote, that way.
Yep.
we
That's
gotta-
option A.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that's this one.
Yep, that's consistent with what I heard last council meeting.
All right. All right, does anybody have any other questions or thoughts on that?
Well, we recommend R137 2022 option A to council.
Correct.
Second.
Make that a motion.
All right. Anybody have any other questions or thoughts on that? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 And are any opposed? All right, we will recommend that action to council.
And then I'm going to turn it over to Rodney for the next couple.
All right, yeah, the resolutions for US Highway 51 reconstructions in two parts.
Yeah, in general terms, this is just part of the US 51 Majors project with different segments of the project. You'll recall we've already entered into one of these for 5th Street to Spring Road. The one that's on your agenda first is from Harrison Street to Roby Road. You'll recognize there's a component identified as the Stoughton Utilities aspect for the underground work that they'd be doing as part of that project. The Utilities Committee recommended approval of their portion. So you'll see that both utilities portion and the city portion on tonight's council agenda for that segment. Really, I don't know that there's anything, happy to talk about specifics. You'll recognize within the resolution, we identified how the appropriations are made, what type of sidewalks we have to pay for, what the wider sidewalk we have to pay 100% for, replacement, replacements in kind. We don't actually have to pay for replacement, but we paid 20% towards new sidewalks, that's infill segments. You'll recognize in this stretch, I think the one part that's notable in this stretch is having a 10-foot sidewalk from Hamilton Street out to Roby Road, essentially.
Yeah.
You'll see pieces of that going in as part of the roundabout project, but on the north side, we're really trying to improve pedestrian, and as we know, bicyclists will likely use that as well, just to get off the 4-lane roadway. Kind of digressing just momentarily for this segment, we had a discussion with the DOT late last week about a possibility of a lane configuration change to consider from Page Street out to either Van Buren or farther out. They call it a twiddle. Essentially, it's one lane going either way with a dedicated lane in the middle where all left turn lanes are. So one of the reasons that wasn't evaluated before is because of the traffic volume projections were above kind of the threshold to allow those to accommodate that level of traffic. They've done some additional modeling, actually county-wide, region-wide, and the traffic projections for the design year out to 2042 or 2046 actually have been reduced because of some of the improvements in their modeling programs. And so now we get to evaluate that again. So I think in August, we'll start to discuss that with the Public Works Committee. I don't know that it necessarily changes anything specific to this agreement, but it does possibly introduce the opportunity for additional terrace width and maybe on-street bike lanes as well because of some of the reduction in travel lanes. So there's some alternatives that we'll discuss more. But where I was kind of going with is it might allow us to run that 10-foot sidewalk on the north side back down farther, closer to about Jurtson instead of Hamilton Street. So we're trying to obviously improve pedestrian safety in the entire corridor. You'll recognize lighting's included in this. We've really just got a standard lighting package at this point. Brett and I and Jill have been talking about maybe upgrade lighting standards. There isn't a package that we put together that is presentable yet at this point, but evaluating whether that's something the city wants to consider. So I think this is a very suitable, very consistent agreement for this segment. And I guess I'd be open to answer any questions you might have for this. It identifies our cost for this segment, approximately 575, was it?
585.
585 for the city's portion of that segment of the work. Again, this is slated for, I believe it was 2026 construction. So it's coming fast. We're talking about design features with the DOT at this time, so it's important to get.
So this is all in conjunction with, or in collaboration with the Department of Transportation?
Yeah, in reality, it's a DOT, they're doing all the design. I mean, we're participating in it, but it is going to be a DOT lead project.
Okay, so they're gonna be doing it, but it'll be our portion of it we have to pay then?
That's correct. There's a municipal portion of it. And in reality, as a community, it's gonna be disruptive, but we're gonna end up with a totally new roadway all the way through the city in the next 7 to 8 years. Again, disruptive, but it's gonna be a big improvement, and setting us up for a long-term improvement is important.
Rodney, I just had a question. Does the DOT have any clout as far as locking in prices? Because I know that we've been zinged, with price increases sometimes. How realistic are these numbers? Do they, again, I guess I'm wondering are they able to lock in better than we might be able to, or could these really go way up?
I can't speak for them, but I'm not aware of any mechanism they have outside the toolbox similar to what we have, a publicly bid process. In reality, I think DOT pays more just because it's a DOT project in some cases. But we have to recognize our percentage on the improvements is pretty reasonable. In reality, the street work is all being paid for, all the curb and gutter, all the replacement of the sidewalk is really 100% paid for. We're really paying for extras from what we have on the system now. So obviously, we're all hopeful, but we're not optimistic that the prices are going to come down. We're concerned about the competition for projects. A lot of the bill funding and other projects, federal programming, is going to have a flood of projects on the market at the same time. And there's still only a fixed number of contractors and labor and supplies to do these projects. So we are concerned about what that means even for our local projects, but similarly the DOT projects.
Got a chance the prices could come down too. If interest rates get higher, people slow down building.
Yeah, true.
Prices could
Yeah.
come down.
We'll be optimistic.
I mean,
It could happen.
possible. And Rod, you said if we put in 10-foot sidewalks, we'd have to pay 100%?
We pay for the additional width, the 5 foot.
100% of the additional width.
Yep, we pay for 100% of over 5 feet wide. And if there's already sidewalks there, we don't have to pay anything for the 5 foot that's being replaced. But there's segments where there is no sidewalks, we have to pay 20% of that amount. And then we'd have to pay 100% for the additional 5 feet in those locations.
I think having the paths run all the way out there, I thought it looked really great. I mean, I think that will really open up that area for a bit more foot, bike traffic.
Yeah.
And make it definitely more accessible,
Yeah.
Make it much safer.
safer, for sure.
And that patchwork that they did last 2 or 3 years ago, God, that's already falling apart.
Yep, I hear plenty of grumblings about the construction and some of the conditions that are in there too, so say, bear with us.
Yep.
It's gonna look great when it's all finished up, and you won't recognize it anymore. Almost literally, especially when they went from where the two lanes merge down into one right by Jackson there, because that's always a hot spot, kind of. So, I mean, when that goes away, it'll be
Great.
well, crazy.
Rodney, just a quick one. Utilities is about $764,000. How difficult is that going to be for them to coordinate with the DOT and get their work done? I'm assuming they're going to be doing their work at the same time the DOT is going to be pulling up blacktop.
Yeah, I think the utilities can speak to it more directly, but I think this would actually be work that's included in the DOT project.
Oh, okay.
So this is the scope of work that the Stoughton Utilities has identified that needs to be done for their improvements, but that it would be part of the DOT project.
So but that's our portion of what they're going to do.
Yep.
Okay. Same as, okay.
In not all phases do they have utility costs identified, and they don't have needs for utility work in all the phases.
Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense then.
Sure.
All right, I sort of lumped these two together as for just the discussion portion of it, but we'll act on them separately.
If that's the case, if you don't mind, I'll just speak to the second one just momentarily.
Yep.
So the second one really includes the larger ticket item is the underpass. You'll recall that council authorized moving forward with the design, but in reality, they really want to know that we're fully behind moving forward with the underpass. It is a big ticket item. We haven't been able to. We think that if we endorse this agreement, it also solidifies our ability to move forward with grant applications. It shows the city's commitment to try to get this project completed, and I think it offers an opportunity to reinforce our grant opportunities for that as well. There's no guarantees, but certainly it really goes to the heart of our commitment to try to have that pedestrian underpass. Just to describe that pedestrian underpass, just so you know, as you recall, we're going to have a 10-foot sidewalk on either side of 51. The underpass is physically just the area under, but the sidewalks would then come down and meet that level. So the underpass is really contained within the right-of-way, if you will. We were theorizing in the past about what would happen to lands to the east and west. That doesn't mean the trail can't extend east and west, but it can function without having a trail immediately going east and west, because it's going to tie into the sidewalks that are parallel to 51. So I think that's an important aspect of it to be aware of. In addition, part of the underpass cost is really the retaining wall structures. To create this, it's not just putting a big box culvert under 51. There's a lot of additional, work that has to be done, and I think you might notice that the retaining wall cost is a pretty substantial portion of that. So, understanding the city's interest in facilitating that in that region, this moves that forward. What would happen is the underpass would be designed in a manner that would raise the profile of 51 slightly to accommodate this. In the event that we did not move forward with or approve that as a portion of this agreement, they wouldn't design the roadway in that manner. So the likelihood of ever being able to accomplish it later is even more challenging. So if we're going to have one, now's the time to really incorporate it into the design. I'll just add one last thing. In the event that the city finds out a year or so down the road or two that ultimately we can't really afford the underpass, and we have to have that taken out of the project, the DOT acknowledges that might become a reality, but we are putting forward our best belief at this point that we'd like to move forward with it if we endorse it at this point.
I knew we had talked about, or it had been talked about, the instead of an underpass to have a bridge, pedestrian. I can't even say it, pedestrian bridge instead. Can you talk to that a little bit? Was that a lot more expensive?
Yeah. So pedestrian overpass, I think is what you're referring to. I think there's a lot of. I think there's a belief that they're not utilized to the same level as an underpass. There's a lot more grade issues, it's a bridge structure, there's more long-term maintenance issues that are associated with it, and even the ability to get ADA access to an elevated ramp location, you have to take that into consideration. So you have a lot more approach work that has to be done to elevate to the height of a bridge, as opposed to facilitating an underpass at grade.
So there's a lot more expensive.
That's our belief. It's more expensive, and I think DOT suggests sometimes they're not utilized as well. People are tending to use the at-grade crossings if they're available, as opposed to an underpass where there isn't a long circular route oftentimes to get up to the level of an overpass.
My concern is simply public safety. I'm sure that they'll be addressing that, I don't know, cameras, lighting, whatever. But, you know, that's still a concern. I hope that can be addressed by them, as to how this is going to be constructed.
Well, certainly the design will take into account lighting and other things, and we're part of that design process, so we'd be attempting to facilitate that. The other piece that I think is more problematic for the overpass in this situation is the available real estate. You know, I talked about how this is being able to be designed essentially in the confines of the right-of-way that's available to us. In an overpass structure, far less likely to have that occur, and you probably need to acquire additional right-of-way, and acquisition of right-of-way for trails is a problem in the state right now. So.
They built one of these a couple years ago where our daughter lives in Northfield, Minnesota, and it's beautiful, and does it work well? I mean, it's very well designed, and before the kids had to try to cross this highway to get to schools, there's 4 schools on the other side of that highway, and now that underpass is in there with the, it's amazing what it looks like.
Where's that?
In Northfield, Minnesota. And then they painted the walls, you got different paintings of flowers and whatever, but it cost them $1.3 million, I think, to do it, but, and you see it used all the time now with kids and people on their bikes, because before it wasn't safe to do. Now our grandkids will take their bikes to school. Before they couldn't do it because they had to cross that main road. But, if it's designed, it's like you just explained it with the sidewalks and stuff, it sounds just like the one that's up there.
Thank you for
Very
the
nice.
feedback.
It's very safe.
Good to hear.
I think if we just tunneled under the highway and put 2 Stoughton trailers end to end under there, that should, right?
That'd be a cost savings for
Yeah.
sure.
40 years ago, we probably could have done, no, standards have changed.
Yeah.
Um,
Now with this, if they build this as an underpass, will that be enough of a span that then it would have to be, would it be considered like an inspectable bridge then?
Yeah, most structures like that are still classified bridges, even if you've got large box culverts.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of what we have down at the river here.
Right.
Large box culverts are really classified as bridge structures, so I think you'd still have that type of inspection
Okay.
necessary.
Okay.
This is a 2026 project as
Yep.
well. One piece I was going to add about this segment, recall that that's when the roundabout would get put in at Rutland Downtown Line Road.
So they're already moving dirt anyway.
Remember, there's kind of a temporary intersection design that's
Yep.
going in as part of this until the 2026 roundabout would be installed.
Yeah, I think it'll be kind of a wild concept for everyone to think about, those paths running up and down 51, where there are fields at the moment.
Right.
What do we need those out there for? Like, well, wait till the developments get through, and then you'll see where it's useful.
Right.
Bike path to nowhere.
Yeah, for the moment it would be, but.
But Rodney, that's the fiscal impact, that's going to be in the CIP for,
Yeah, so these are all, we've already put them in our staff level CIP to present to you with the assumption these would move forward.
All right, does anybody have any other questions on these 2 items? All right, and I would entertain a motion to approve the first one, the Highway 51 reconstruction from Harrison to Roby.
So moved?
Second.
All right, let's take a pick on the seconds. Any other questions on this one in particular? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 And are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend that one up to council. And now I would entertain a motion for the second part of that, the US Highway 51 from Roby to County Highway B.
So moved.
Second.
All right, and a second. Any other questions on this one? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 And are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend that one to council also. All right, Dave, now we get into our amending of things for their housekeeping plus the other one that's a little bit more non-housekeeping.
So the first one for the shared ride service, number one, we're moving it out of the general fund into a newly created fund. And number two, we are reporting the revenues that the public is paying. So increasing revenues by 104 and increasing expenses by 104. It doesn't change the bottom line, though.
And I think this one will be good, because I think every year when we come up to renew the taxi grant, or when that contract comes up, we always ask, like, well, how much in fares was paid,
Right.
ridership, all that sort of thing. So I think this will fit in nicely with that. That we'll be able to see that kind of as a month to month then.
So net zero.
Net zero, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion to recommend to council.
All right.
Second.
All right, second by Ben. Any other questions on that? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 And are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend that amendment up to council, and give me one moment to catch up on a note here. All right. Next item is to amend the revolving loan program budget for calendar year 2022.
Okay. The RDA has control over the revolving loan fund, so this is just moving it into their funds so that they can readily see it. And as discussed at the last meeting, we did overstate the budget or the fund balance by $164,000 roughly. So this is correcting for that error. So that will come out of the fund balance of the revolving loan fund, but it obviously has the available funds to do it.
Anybody have any questions about this one? That one will have some fiscal impact, yes, for that 164,000.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I need to update the fiscal impact. So yeah, the 164,018 is the fiscal impact.
And that one is just coming directly out of that revolving loan fund?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, just trying to get that squared away. Does anyone have any questions about that? All right, I'll entertain a motion to recommend that to council for amendment.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
second, all right. Any other questions on this one? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend that one to council. Next up is the amendment for the EMS budget for 2022.
Okay, EMS, for whatever reason, we had two separate funds for their sinking fund, so really the only activity in those was interest income and the checking or investment cash. So I'm recommending that we just combine all three together so that Lisa can have the reports at any time of what's available.
Make it a lot easier to follow too, won't it?
Yep.
All combined.
And the auditors were very pleased because they won't have to eliminate those interfund transfers because they combine everything on the financial statement anyway.
Kind of a no-brainer.
Oh, no fiscal impact, it's just simply a
Yep.
procedural change.
Correct, it's accounting.
Yep. All right, anybody have any other questions about this one? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve that one.
Motion to recommend to council, so moved.
All right,
Second.
second, Ozzy. Any other questions, comments on this one? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
And
Aye.
any opposed? All right, we'll recommend that fund consolidation to council. Next one up is to amend the Opera House budget for 2022.
This one, similar to other areas, the Opera House had about $6,000 sitting in their investment account for 6 years, doing nothing, and I said, let's just move it into the Opera House.
Net zero again, no problem,
Yep.
moving funds.
Correct.
Move to
Just need
recommend to
budget
council.
authority to do it.
Yeah, move to recommend to council.
All right, motion by Greg, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ozzy. Any other questions on this one? This one seems pretty easy too. All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
And are any
Aye.
opposed? All right, we'll recommend that merger of funds to council. And last one, to amend the EMS trust fund budget for 2022.
Well, what we're calling the trust fund budget isn't really a trust fund. It's federal grant activities, CPR courses, and donations. So I'm recommending that we transfer everything into the EMS fund so that everything is together.
And net zero, right?
Correct.
Recommend to council approval.
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any questions about that one? That one seems simple again, so,
And again, I'll, as was pointed out, I'll have to fix the top where it says
Yeah.
Opera House, but it talks about EMS.
yep.
I will work with Dave to make sure that we have all this figured out, and he can absolutely guide and help me with the new accounting system. So Dave, I appreciate your work with this.
Glad to help.
All right, and you're not, or the last 5 that we've gone through, just these amendments, you wanna bring that one into next council's meeting, not this one?
Right, I did not notice them as
Okay,
time
perfect.
sensitive.
All right, so then we don't have to, or we got time to clean all of that up.
I don't know if we voted on this last one, did we?
No, oh, thank you, good catch. All right, all in favor, aye, on that
Aye.
last
Aye.
one.
Aye.
We intended to.
Yes,
Okay.
That was good enough.
and are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend that one to council then, at the next meeting. All right, we ran the gamut, how was that? Future agenda items are including the July finance reports we will see at the end of August, second meeting in August. Still hanging on to special assessments discussion. The fund balance policy, so we'll probably maybe reinforce what we've discussed about fund balance and
Right, and
contingency and all that.
the current fund balance policy also talks about contingency and how much is supposed to be there, so
Yep.
based upon what's gonna be happening tonight, we'll have to amend the policy
Yep.
anyway.
So we'll work on that one, so that will be good for that. And then the boundary amendment for TID 6.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to contact Ellers and have them start the process so that we can get that done before year end.
All right. Anybody wish anything else added into the future items? I mean, we got a couple of things hanging out there, but that's okay. I think we can get them wrapped up. All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Any other questions, comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Regina.